Hi and welcome my Varieties 3 to a new session. Today we're going to be talking about a different variety, a text that is completely different from what we have covered in the last lectures. Today we're going to be discovering and exploring the general aspects and characteristics of scientific English text, okay? And remember, please, as when we are performing stylistic analysis, to think about three things: accuracy, clarity, and objectivity. So let's get started. The language of science, okay? So remember, we are completely done with the language of legal document, and now we're moving to the language of science, where we have the language of scientific reports, experiments, and so on. So let's uh, dive into this type of variety. The language of science has some characteristic of its own which distinguish it from other types of English. Its function is to convey knowledge and facts obtained through experimentation or hypothesis. The emphasis is therefore on accuracy, objectivity, exactness, and establishing a clear and logical progression of facts, discoveries, descriptions, and ideas. Okay, so remember that we use scientific English in order to convey knowledge. When we write actually a report or a text where we convey knowledge or facts that are obtained through hypothesis or experimentation. The emphasis is usually on accuracy, objectivity, exactness, and establishing a very clear logical progression of facts, discoveries, descriptions, and ideas. So, what are the linguistic, stylistic characteristics which can help achieve these functions of accuracy, objectivity, and clarity? Now, the following stylistic analysis will illustrate this. Paragraphing. In scientific English, paragraphs are generally organized well. So they are well structured and well organized. They usually consist of a topic sentence, an amplification or an expansion or a body, and a conclusion. The conclusion actually is usually a kind of summary for the results. Organization of paragraphing is normally postulated in a variety like scientific English, which insists on clarity and organization of data and ideas. Thus, the function of well-organized paragraphs is to reflect the organized nature and formality of language of science. In terms of titling, titles and subtitles are usually used in scientific English and sometimes with various graphological devices, such as bold typing, italics, capitalization, underlining. All these actually tools of graphology are used in titling, okay, especially for the headings and for the subheadings. Now, the function of titling is to summarize the main point of a paragraph or a text to demonstrate another point of organization, as titles are not haphazardly but deliberately to highlight central ideas and concepts. Okay, so maybe we have one main heading, but under the headings we have subheadings, and in every subheading we have a paragraph that talks about it, and then we move on to another point. Now, we don't move on or we jump to another point just like that abruptly. No, we have to organize things. So we have to move on to the next point by first write a heading, and then we move smoothly to talk about figures and symbols. A distinguishing feature of the layout of scientific English is the frequent use of equations, figures, diagrams, tables, picture, and symbols, such as the mathematical symbols. Now, these have a very important function. First, for illustration to be clear and accurate. Otherwise, experiments may be in doubt or not understood, to say the least. So they have to support their text by means of equations, figures, diagrams, charts, tables, pictures, illustrations, symbols, and so on. Okay, as for punctuation, nothing marked about punctuation. It is used perfectly normal and conventional. All punctuation marks are used, however, the explanation or the exclamation mark is absent because there is nothing to exclaim about in scientific language. The questions marks or the question marks are used for supplying answers, results, facts, discoveries, but doesn't pose questions. When a question is posed, it is posed to be answered instantly. All right. So in a scientific text, when we have or when you find any question, so make sure that you will have the answer in the text. Okay. There is no question where you have to answer it or the reader should, engage and answer it. No, it doesn't actually work in this way. So whenever you have a question in a scientific report or a text, that means we have the answer instantly. Emphatic devices. There are several devices for emphasizing a word or a phrase, such as capitalization, underlining, italics, bold type. All these are exploited in scientific English to emphasize an important item. Now, in Figure 28, paragraph 4, like flat and slices, which are put between two inverted commas to exert more emphasis on them. So, whenever you find inverted commas, that means that this is or this word or this term is important in this context. Okay, so as for grammar, sentence structure, there are actually three main features of sentence structure of scientific English that are worth considering here. First of all, we have simple structure, we have long sentences, and declarative sentences. Simple structure. Sentences are usually simple. That is, the subject, verb, object, or complement can be located easily. For example, in Figure 27, conventional X-ray machines send a focused beam. Now, this is a perfect sentence that contains all the component of a simple sentence. All right, subject, verb, and object. Ultrasound has also taken its proper place. Now, ultrasound is the subject, has also taken, that's the verb, its proper place, that's the object. Exciting potential exists for diagnosis. Now, exciting potential, that's the subject, exist is the verb, while for diagnosis, that's simply the complement. You see how easy are the sentences in English for scientific text. Long sentences. Sentences tend to be long, but they are not complicated because of the easiness locating their main constituents. Like, even if we find long sentences, doesn't mean that they are complex, but they can be long, but at the same time very simple sentences. Declarative sentences are predominant in the language of science. There is no need for negation or posing questions or command for supplying explanations or illustrations. Results and other details can be given more clearly and naturally by using declarative sentences. In Figure 28, the whole text is almost written in declarative sentence. All these features of sentence structure have the function of easing the risk of understanding scientific texts by allowing them to flow naturally and at the same time reflecting the formal style of scientific English. Okay, so all these features of simplicity, of declarative sentences, and so on, so they actually work on achieving easiness of understanding, and also they help actually, or they function as reflecting the formal style of scientific English. Sentence connectivity. The most popular connectors in scientific English are as follows. Logical connectors, especially thus, are frequently used to indicate a summary or a logical result. Thus is distinguished as characteristic of this variety. Then and therefore are also employed in the text. Connectors of contrast such as but, yet, and however to provide a counter argument. connectors of addition, like and or, in particular, are used to accumulate relevant information together. All these types of connectors are used conventionally and formally um, in scientific English to aid clarity, precision, and seriousness of content. Verb phrases. As for verb phrases in scientific English can be considered through the following points. First of all, we have very simple verbs. The verbs used are simple and common. And for the tense, three main tenses of verb are used. For example, simple past to indicate past achievement or studies, experiments, or discoveries. So we might actually be using a simple past and talk about like a previous experiment or study. That when you refer to it or to its results, then you have, of course, to use the simple past. As for present, to imply a reference to present time as well as scientific facts. Present perfect is used to demonstrate well-established findings and accomplishments. When it comes to passive versus active, one of the prominent features of scientific English is the recurrent use of the passive voice in order to achieve objectivity. The agent need not to be stated, for results and facts are more important than people in science. So names of persons are mentioned only when an invention requires to be associated with the inventor. Also, passive is always an indication of formality of style. Okay, so for example, small amounts are introduced, sound waves are directed, similar computer techniques are being used, magnetic resonance has been or used. Okay, so I don't have, like, when I write a scientific text about anything that I found or discovered, I won't say I found out that, for example, taking the vaccination can really help people and prevent them from taking up the virus. Okay, so for example, I could put this in passive. Okay, so taking vaccination or taking, for example, taking the vaccinations were found out to be or was found out to be really helpful as to avoid taking up the virus. Acronyms and abbreviations. Acronyms, that is to say, the combination of the first letters of two or more words, as UN for United Nations as well. Abbreviations, the first two or three letters of a word, that is to say, ENG for English, department for depth. Alright, so they are widely used in English for scientific texts. So remember that acronyms are usually the first words, okay, of any like the United Nations, UN. But abbreviations, we can use three letters or more to count for one word. For example, English, ENG, department, depth. Examples of in figure actually 28, like CT, that stands for, this is actually a acronym, okay, that stands for computer tomography. ECT, emission computer tomography, that's another acronym. MR, magnetic resonance, that's another acronym. Almost all scientific texts use acronyms and abbreviations, including symbols. The function of these is to reflect the tendency of scientific English to shorten some terms, especially those which are frequently used in text. Both acronyms and abbreviations are highly popular in scientific texts. Now, as for foreign words, scientific English is still rich with foreign words, especially from Latin and Greek, or of Latin and Greek derivation. Examples from figure 28, diagnosis, digital, tomography, radiography, ultrasound, all these words, techniques, procedure, nuclei, sodium. Now, all these words are actually not English. They are loan words, or as we say, these words are originally from Latin or Greek. In fact, what is now called international scientific technical terms are generally Latin or of Latin origin. This is perhaps why some of them are very long and difficult to read. For example, of course, I'm not going to read all this word. I don't know how to read it. But this word, this very long and complicated word, simply means a jawbreaker. The function of the prevalent use of Latin and Greek vocabulary in scientific English is to reflect its highly formal style and a confirmation of the historical use of Latin, in particular in the British universities and prestigious academic institutions in the past. Because as we saw, like even in legal document, Latin was the language of prestige, was the language of education. So, and this effect actually still resonated in the language of science as well. Alright, so circumlocutions, I believe that maybe you have never actually like encountered this word before, but when you learn about it, now it becomes easy in your mind and you will understand it better. Now, circumlocutions actually are words and expressions which are unnecessarily long. They are also called redundant. Scientific English sometimes resorts to circumlocutions to avoid using pronouns, names of people in active voice. So it is used in order to avoid, for example, mentioning the people or the researchers' names and so on. Look at these examples. Instead of saying I think, okay, it is the opinion of the writer. Look how long is this, okay? But circumlocutions are always desirable in this context. The result of the experiment shows instead of I conclude or we conclude. So the result of the experiment shows. It has been discovered by scientists instead of scientists have discovered. Okay, and we use all these forms of circumlocutions in order to avoid the passive form or the active form. The chief reasons behind using this feature is to avoid using pronouns whatsoever and to avoid using the active form. The function is to emphasize the abstract and objective nature of scientific English text.
Circumlocution, circumlocution, circumlocution.
Now with phonology, we come up with the last slide in this lecture. So phonology, elegant and beautiful language, is insignificant to scientific English, just like in legal language. Phonology doesn't play any role in scientific English because scientific English is highly formal, highly serious, very frozen. So we are not actually here to entertain people or to amuse them using any phonological devices here. Thanks for attention. See you next week.